Madam President.
The senator from Iowa.
Madam President, I want to speak about the effort that seems to be underway here now, and I guess we'll be having some more amendments this afternoon from the other side of the aisle, to prevent the President from addressing a serious national security problem: the continued operation of the detention center at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Madam President, it's long past time to close this facility. On May the 23rd, 2007, almost exactly 2 years ago, I introduced legislation to close that detention center. Since that time, unfortunately, it has only become more imperative that we act. It remains the case that there is simply no compelling reason to keep the facility open and not to bring the detainees to maximum security facilities here in the United States. This nation has long been a beacon of democracy, a champion of human rights throughout the world. Over the past 8 years, however, we have repeatedly betrayed our highest principles. Torture was authorized in direct violation of the law, and we intentionally put detainees beyond the most basic rules of law, including secret tribunals, where detainees lacked opportunities to challenge their confinement and lacked sufficient due process. These errors are manifested in the detention center at Guantanamo Bay, whose very purpose was to avoid providing legal safeguards that are enshrined in our Constitution and the Geneva Convention to detainees, and to prevent independent courts from reviewing the legality of the administration's actions. That was the purpose of Guantanamo as a detention center. Well, now that the Supreme Court has definitively ruled that constitutional protections apply at Guantanamo, it truly serves no purpose. Closing the facility, however, does not just follow from a commitment to our most cherished values and constitutional principles. Rather, closure is essential for our national security. As long as the detention center at Guantanamo Bay is open, it remains a recruiting tool for those who wish to do us harm and provides ammunition for our enemies. Now, this is not just my view, but it is the view of military and foreign policy officials. Director of National Intelligence Dennis Blair has said that, quote, "The detention center has become a damaging symbol to the world. It is a rallying cry for terrorist recruitment and harmful to our national security. So closing it is important for our national security," end quote. That's from Dennis Blair, our Director of National Intelligence. Former Navy General Counsel Alberta Mora has said, quote, "There are serving U.S. flag rank officers who maintain that the first and second identifiable causes of U.S. combat deaths in Iraq, as judged by their effectiveness in recruiting insurgent fighters into combat, are respectively the symbols of Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo," end quote. Retired Air Force Major Matthew Alexander, who led the interrogation team that tracked down al-Zarqawi, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq, said, quote, "I listened time and time again to foreign fighters and Sunni Iraqis state that the number one reason they had decided to pick up arms and join al-Qaeda was the abuses at Abu Ghraib and the authorized torture and abuse at Guantanamo Bay." Madam President, let me repeat that. Matthew Alexander, retired Air Force Major who led the interrogation team that tracked down the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq, said this. Listen. He says, "I listened time and time again to foreign fighters and Sunni Iraqis state that the number one reason that they had picked up arms and joined al-Qaeda was the abuses at Abu Ghraib and the authorized torture and abuse at Guantanamo Bay," end quote. You can't get much clearer than that. Colin Powell, Henry Kissinger, Madeleine Albright, James Baker, Warren Christopher have all called for Guantanamo to be closed, as has Secretary of Defense Gates and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mullen. As former Secretary of State Colin Powell said, quote, "Guantanamo has become a major, major problem. If it were up to me, I would close Guantanamo not tomorrow, but this afternoon." End quote. That was Colin Powell. Indeed, even President Bush repeated time and time again his desire to shut down Guantanamo. I'm sure because of all the information that was given to him by his Joint Chiefs of Staff and by his intelligence services. So President Obama should be applauded for taking a step that military and foreign policy officials insist will directly and immediately improve our national security. The President has set up a special task force to review the status of the detainees remaining at Guantanamo and to make recommendations on what to do with these individuals. The administration faces some difficult decisions that it inherited from the previous administration. Guantanamo was conceived. Guantanamo as a detention center, I should say, was conceived outside the law. And bringing detainees back into our legal system, as the Supreme Court has rightly found necessary, involves some very difficult policy issues. I myself greatly look forward to the President's plan, and I'll judge it carefully. Closing Guantanamo and simply replicating the same deficient legal process in the United States would be purely symbolic and meaningless. As the administration undertakes its review of the detainees at Guantanamo and considers the most appropriate way to close the facility, the last thing Congress should do is handcuff the President. Now, what I'm hearing some arguments on the other side of the aisle, or they basically are saying is, through these amendments that they're offering, is that Guantanamo Bay should remain open. That's really the thrust of the amendments. Guantanamo Bay should remain open. Make no mistake, if these amendments become law, the President's ability to take the step that military and foreign policy officials, Republicans and Democrats and independents alike have all said is needed will be very difficult. It'll be difficult for the President to take the steps necessary to close Guantanamo. Al-Qaeda and those who wish to cause us harm will continue to have a major recruiting tool at their disposal. At their disposal. Now, I wouldn't say that this is the intention of the people offering these amendments. But if you listen to what our intelligence officers have said and what our military officers have said, that the biggest recruiting tool for those in Afghanistan and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda is a continued detention center at Guantanamo. So while it may not be the intention of those people offering the amendments to have this as a recruiting tool for Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, those who have been in our intelligence service tell us that that is in fact what is happening. It is the biggest recruiting tool for those who wish to do us harm. So while it may not be the intention of those offering amendments, that is what's going to be the practical effect if those amendments are adopted. Now, one other thing, President Obama's decision to close Guantanamo is already starting to pay some dividends. Countries such as Portugal and Ireland have made offers to join Albania in accepting detainees that cannot be returned to their home countries. Just last week, France accepted Lakhdar Boumediene, an Algerian suspected in a bomb plot against the U.S. Embassy in Sarajevo. So the assistance of our allies is critical. Yet to obtain that assistance will be more difficult if we ourselves are unwilling to do what we ask our allies to do, and that is accept detainees on our own soil in secure detention facilities. We say, oh, no, we can't take them here, but France, you can take them, and Ireland, you can take them, and Portugal, you can take them. I mean, they're going to say, what? What kind of fairness is there in that? Indeed, I feel the statements and the arguments of many on the other side of the aisle will simply scare the American people, unduly scare the American people, and spread this kind of fear and misinformation. by suggesting that closing the facility at Guantanamo Bay will somehow mean that terrorists will be walking Main Street. Or as the junior senator from Arizona claimed, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his partners will be our, quote, neighbors. Will be our neighbors. If they're in secure detention facilities. This is the kind of language that rightfully gets Americans fearful. They're going to be our neighbors? Well, the fact is that those individuals who can be tried in federal court can and will be vigorously prosecuted. Federal courts have successfully prosecuted terrorists in the past. In fact, between September the 12th, 2001, and the end of 2007, 145 terrorists were convicted in American courts. Now, how many American people know that? 145 were convicted in American courts. Likewise, United States prisons are already holding some of the world's most dangerous terrorists in the United States. Ramzi Youssef, the mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, is in jail in the United States. Zacharias Masai, a 9/11 co-conspirator, is in jail in the United States. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, in jail in the United States. Several al-Qaeda terrorists responsible for bombing embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in jail in the United States. The men, women, and military officials who run these facilities have a proven track record. I ask those who are saying that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his partners will be our neighbors, I ask them, can you point to any prisoner who has escaped from a federal maximum security facility? Point to one. Just point to one. Well, Madam President, we have no greater duty than to protect the American people. That is the oath that we all take. National security is our first job. In this regard, the President is undertaking a process that will result in the closing of a national stain on our character and a recruiting tool for those who wish to do us harm. He's taking a step our military and foreign policy officials make clear will make us safer. Make us safer. The President should not be handcuffed and should not be prevented from improving our national security, as the other side and those amendments wish to do. Finally, we must never forget that people around the world know that we are right and the terrorists are wrong. Out of the 5 or 6 billion people that live in the world, only a handful think the terrorists are right. All the rest are on our side. They know we're right and the terrorists are wrong. If we want to defeat the terrorists, therefore, we should remain faithful to our ideals and our values. We will not win this war with secret prisons, torture chambers, degrading treatment, with individuals denied basic human rights. Rather, we will win this by upholding our values and insisting on legal safeguards that are the very basis of our system of government and democracy. It's time to close Guantanamo Bay. There is no reason to keep it open, and every reason for our national security to shut its doors. Madam President, with that, I yield the floor.